Hey everybody, I wanted to give you some feedback on your Kant posts and correct some misunderstandings that you all have. They're very common, so don't feel bad about that. But we definitely need to address a few issues. But I want to say again, as with your earlier posts, I'm very impressed with the level of effort you're putting in. You're clearly reading and thinking and working through these things, and that's all a professor could ever ask. So keep it up. I hope you're learning. I really love the fact that you're commenting on other people's posts, reading them, and trying to learn from them. So please keep that up, and I'm really enjoying this. And of course, it takes me a lot longer to get through them because you guys are so thorough, but that's a good problem to have. So before I grade each of your things individually, and I probably won't be giving you as many comments written as I normally would, I wanted to give you this video to cover some of the common issues that I found for you all. So let's take a few minutes and look at these. The first is having to do with the relationship between respect, which Kant, of course, argues for fundamentally, and this idea of relativism. And I know in the neat notes on the first page, I discuss relativism and lay it out and what it means. That obviously confused some of you because if you just read that paragraph, you're going to think that Kant supports relativism. If you look at the next paragraph, it begins with "but," and then it really lays out Kant's answer to relativism. So sometimes, in order to understand an author's perspective, a philosopher's perspective, you have to describe some of what they're against, some of the main ideas that they are responding to and trying to challenge or defeat, if you will. And one of those is relativism. So relativism refers to the idea that we hear all the time in the modern world, in our lives. Hey, everyone's got an opinion. You shouldn't push your opinions on other people. There's really no right answer to this. It all depends. There's no right or wrong except what people think or maybe what a culture thinks. And we should all just let everyone have their opinions. That set of ideas is what's called relativism, meaning right and wrong are relative to maybe one's culture or one's community or even to specific individuals, that everyone has a different opinion. Kant does not believe this at all, but it can be confusing when he says that we have to obey, that we have to respect everyone absolutely. Because that sounds a lot like relativism, right? If you're a relativist, you go around saying, it's not very respectful for you to criticize that person's actions or their moral view or that culture. We shouldn't criticize cultures. We should respect them. So it's understandable that when Kant says we should respect people, that we might think he means treat everyone's moral opinions as equal and don't criticize them. How is that not the case? Kant thinks that the only thing worth respecting, always, lots of things are maybe worth respecting, but the only things that is always worth respecting and that should always be respected is freedom. The freedom to choose what we want and what we're going to do. This is, of course, what he calls autonomy. And it means when you reach a certain age, you begin to understand that you don't have to follow what your parents are doing and that you have the capacity to stop and think and ask yourself, what am I trying to do? What do I want to do? What should I do? And then you are free to actually make your choice. And you might choose to do the wrong thing. You might choose to do the right thing. But it's the fact that you can choose. Autonomy is what Kant thinks is worthy of the ultimate respect. So he uses different words for it, freedom or choice or the will, but they all refer to that basic fact. So his categorical imperative, the second way he talks about it in terms of respect, would be something like this. I promise to not use your will or your freedom or your choice without your consent. I promise, in interacting with you, that if I'm going to get you to do something, I'm going to do it in such a way that allows you to choose to do it. So obviously the most egregious violation of this would be something like slavery, where we at gunpoint or in other physical ways coerce people to do things for our will. But Kant thinks that any time we get someone else to agree to something, we have to do it in such a way that they are freely and openly choosing to agree that. And if we don't, we are violating their will and we are disrespecting their will. So a couple examples that you guys wrote out, I'll talk about later. But a difference would be, I might get you to help me move into my apartment next week by persuading you, by offering you money, right? Or by offering to help you the following month with something that you need. In other words, I'm appealing to you to let you make a choice. But what happens too often in human experience is I will appeal to you by deceiving you, by lying to you, right? And there I'm getting you to say, yes, I will do that, right? I'm moving your will in a certain direction, but I'm doing it in such a way that I'm not respecting your will, right? Because I'm getting you to agree to something on a false basis. So teaching, persuading, explaining, paying someone, etc., are ways of getting people to do what you want, but they're ways that still respect their choice. Deception, lying, are ways that go directly at the heart of respect and show that we are merely using someone as a means, as a way to get what we want, and we're not respecting their freedom and their choice. So, how does this relate to relativism? Kant is going to say, when we use people, we can either use them merely as an end, merely as a means to get what we want, or we can remember that they have purposes, they have ends themselves, they have goals that they want, and if we consider their goals and allow them to think about what they would choose to do, it's perfectly fine for us to use them as a means, as long as they agree to do it. So this all, if you can see, it all goes back to this thing that Kant thinks is the essence of morality, which is autonomy, which is the capacity of people to stop and, this is the key point, to think about their actions. They have feelings, everyone has feelings, they have desires, there's all kinds of pressures, there's all kinds of stuff that, sort of influences us as human beings. Autonomy is that capacity to stop in the middle of it and to think about it, to ask, what am I feeling? What am I desiring? What do my parents want? What does my girlfriend want? All of this stuff is around me. To stop and think about it, and then in the midst of that, to make a choice. Sometimes that's what we mean when we call someone rational. So they're being rational, right? They're thinking about something and then they're making a choice. Kant believes that this capacity is what gives us a special dignity. It's what gives us that moral admiration when we do something that's morally great. People admire us for it because they believe that we have freely chosen it. Very often in the face of great danger or risk, we go ahead and do the right thing. People admire us for that. On the other hand, it's the same thing that allows us to assign blame to people and to punish them for doing something wrong. It's the same basis. We admire them because we believe they're free and rational and autonomous. We blame them and hold them responsible because we believe, again, they were free to choose what they did. So the rule for Kant is something like this. The moral law is something like this. Since choice is the very essence of dignity, it's the source and foundation of human dignity, it can never be good, it can never be right to ignore or manipulate someone else's choice. Their capacity to choose always has to be taken into consideration. Can never be merely used as a tool to get what you want. Now, relativism says there are no moral rules, or there are lots of moral rules, and it just depends on whatever one, your culture tells you that's what makes it moral. Or whatever you feel like, that's what makes it moral. Kant is clearly trying to say that everything we've just talked about now is a moral rule that you are not allowed to violate. If you're going to say your action is good, you simply cannot violate another person's freedom. So he is laying out a rule that he believes applies to everyone at all time, and therefore is not a relativist picture at all. You can't choose to say, well, this weekend I'm just going to forget about that and I'm going to use other people for whatever I want without their consent. Kant's going to say, hey, you're free to do that, but you can't say it's right. And I've tried to demonstrate to you why you can't say it's right. Because doing something right means freely choosing, and you can't do something right that is a free choice that denies other people the same free choice. All of the rest of Kant's writing should also be very clear to you that he is not someone who accepts half-truths. He doesn't accept excuses. He believes that when you stop autonomously and consider your actions, you have the capacity to think clearly. It's not always easy, but you have the power and the capacity to think clearly about right and wrong and to come to a firm conclusion about whether your action would be right or wrong. And that's not a matter of opinion. That's not a matter of how you happen to feel or what your culture tells you. It is true because your mind can understand it. So respecting others, treating them as an end, not merely as a means, is one of those moral truths he thinks you can grasp. Okay, I wanted to go through a couple of examples that some of you wrote. I thought this was really, really great. You came up with some ways of sort of thinking through Kant's categorical imperative, his moral law, in real life circumstances. So let me mention at least three of them here. One is, someone says, another example would be whether I should tell my friend that she shouldn't date someone after her divorce because it's hard on her kid's mental health. Okay, so this is a relationship situation. You've got a good friend. You're trying to give them advice. You're worried about their child having a hard time, maybe with a new person in the house. And so you give your friend advice. Maybe they shouldn't be dating. Okay. So you do the right thing here in general, but you kind of get a little bit off of Kant's point. You say, to achieve the ends, I would keep my friend from dating by telling her she shouldn't. So if I want to, and then you say, if I put this into a general law, it's not moral because this would mean no one would be allowed to find love again after marriage. I'd be imposing on her free will by ignoring what she wants, treating her as an end to what I think is best. Okay. So you're right to say Kant would try to put this action into the form of a law and then evaluate it. I think it would be a little more specifically, in this case, something like this. In order to protect a child, I'm going to advise their parent not to date. Because it seems to me your goal in this is to protect the child. So in order to protect a child from emotional pain, I will advise their parent, their mother, not to date other people. Okay. Now, obviously, we're not going to literally have a law like that, but you want to know, is this the right thing to do? Am I doing a good thing or a bad thing? Kant should be able to help me with this. And I think the important point here, important question would be whether or not in talking to your friend, you're trying to persuade her, you're trying to explain to her, you're trying to help her think through her choices and make her choices, or whether you're trying to manipulate her, right? Whether you're not really respecting what she wants, but you're trying to trick her or maybe shame her, make her feel guilt, right? You can have emotional manipulation. We've all probably had lots of examples of that. So that's the line you shouldn't cross. Kant would say if you're talking with your friend and giving them genuine advice in trying to help them think through their circumstances and saying you should, think about your child, and I know that child's important to you, you're being respectful, right? Because you understand this is a choice they're going to make, and you're just trying to be there for them to give them the best advice that you have. Perfectly fine. Perfectly reasonable and fine for Kant. The line would be if you start to realize, you know what, she's not going to listen to me, she's not going to do what I say, but I really want to get her, to stop her from dating, then you start manipulating, then you start shaming, then you start doing these other things that are really not respecting her freedom, but are trying to change her decision on your behalf. That would be crossing the line. That would be disrespectful. Therefore, that would be wrong. Okay, another example. If you are in a store and they give you the wrong price at checkout and it saves you money, so it's a $25 thing, and they give it to you for $10 or something like this. How do you evaluate that again? If I put this into a general law, it might say anyone will pay any shown price when checking out. Okay, you sort of have to have two parts to to this action all the time, the ends and the means. So I think it would be more like this. The law would be, in order to save money, because that's your goal here, right? In order to save money, I will not correct a mistake during a financial transaction. That's very clunky, right? But in a kind of financial transaction, paying and selling, in order to save money, I will not correct the other person when they make a mistake. So would that be a good law to have? Would you respect that law? That everyone in business or at the store, whatever it is, when you're exchanging goods and services for money, that if someone makes a mistake and gives you too much or too little, or charges you too much or too little, the law should be don't correct it. Just keep it. I don't think any of us would say that's a good law, right? It's not a law that we would respect. And Kant would say in most of our lives, we have kind of secret or implicit contracts. So, for example, as a teacher, I have a syllabus, and that's kind of my contract with you. But there are lots and lots and lots of things you expect of me as a teacher that are not written into the syllabus. These are implied. These are sort of just they're unstated because we all understand them. Kant would say it's similar to going to a store. If someone overcharges you or undercharges you, we all understand that the right thing would be to correct them. So I think the important thing here is the student said, if the rule was applied to all stores, they might not care if you get a fair price and overcharge you all the time. Okay, so it might be some bad consequences if we did this. Kant would say, even if, let's say the store doesn't care, you recognize that you're not acting in a way that you would respect if everyone was supposed to do it. So it's really about holding yourself to the right standard and making a choice based upon what you know to be right rather than what happens to be beneficial for you at the moment. All right, and one more was going to the Salvation Army where they're raising money, and you put a nickel in and you take out a piece of candy and you look deep down into your soul, as Kant says you have to do, and you recognize that I really didn't care about those, poor children who were getting my 5 cents. I just wanted some of that sweet, sweet candy, as Homer Simpson would say. So the student says, you're not donating for your pure goodwill to help others. You're donating to get a reward for yourself. You're using the bell ringer as an end to your means, which is the candy that you wanted. Okay. So, yes and no. Kant would say, you're absolutely right. You have to look at your intention. And this student is saying, if you look at that specific intention, it appears to be, on the surface, it appears to be a charity donation when in fact it's selfishly motivated. They just wanted some candy. Now, you're not actually treating someone else as a means to an end. You're not getting the person, standing there with the bells. You're not getting them to do anything or say anything or change what they're doing at all. You're not manipulating their freedom. But what Kant would say is, what you recognize when you looked in your own intentions is that you're not doing it for a pure reason. You're helping other people, but you're doing it because it will help you. Now let's be clear. Kant's not going to say that makes it the action wrong. What he's going to say is, you can't call it good. So lots of times when we might do things for selfish reasons, that doesn't make the action wrong. It just means you can't say to yourself or to others, you should admire this action as a good action. Because Kant says the only thing in the world, he really does say this, the only thing in the world that is absolutely good is a pure will. And he thinks we're capable of doing something out of a pure will, which means we're doing it just because it's the right thing to do. It might also help me. It might not help me. I set that aside and I just look at whether it's right or wrong, and then I choose to do it. And it might backfire. Like the example I gave in the video where you're trying to help your neighbors who've gone away for the winter, and you light their furnace the night before they show up, so they'll have a house that's warm, and unbeknownst to you, there's a gas leak and you blow up the house. Kant's going to say, you did the right thing. You can't control the consequences of your actions. You did the right thing. You reached out to friends. There was nothing in it for you, and you did the right thing to try to help them. And no one, not even a gas explosion, can take that away from you, can turn your pure will into something else, because it was a pure act. As I guess the natural gas was probably pretty pure too, that blew up. Lots of purity. Okay, so there's probably some more things in your post that I might want to respond to, but I wanted to make sure you had some of these clear. I hope I have helped and not confused you more, and I will talk to you soon.